Oh my god! Oh my god! Dude!
If you're into horror movies or the occult, the scary clown doll is a trope that pops up everywhere, all the time in relation to clowns and dolls. In fact, searching around for just haunted dolls will almost always lead you to a haunted clown doll. Even haunted doll creators have mostly clown dolls, or at least they have one or two. So where exactly did this come from, and what popularized it? Grab some candy and let's get spooky as we learn about haunted clown dolls in horror. When it comes to horror, an element of horror that we see coming into play a lot in movies is the corruption of innocence. Something familiar from childhood is twisted and turned against us. The element of fear comes from the idea that an innocent and childlike thing is actually quite the opposite and can hurt us. We can't trust it anymore, and it leaves us vulnerable and afraid. Not only that, but we tend to trust whatever it is, be it a doll or toy, because it's something we are familiar with, and we would never suspect that it's actually corrupted, evil, or haunted. It's one of the great themes of many types of horror. One of the main icons of this type of horror being Chucky, who was originally just based on both the My Buddy doll and the Cabbage Patch craze of the 1980s. In fact, we see this trope pop up time and time again in many different ways throughout horror before clown dolls even began to be mentioned, most notably being with ventriloquist dummies. Ventriloquism first gained a lot of attention and popularity in the 1800s, and the father of modern ventriloquism, Fred Russell, had a permanent act at the Palace Theatre in London in 1886. Fred popularized the idea of sitting with the dummy on his lap and engaging in dialogue with the dummy itself, talking back and forth to the dummy and creating banter. Ventriloquism began to become more popular after this and evolved in vaudeville, which was where one of the most famous ventriloquists, Edgar Bergen, got his start. Edgar had a popular radio show from 1937 to 1956, which revolved around him and his many characters, whom he would also perform with. The most famous of these characters being his ventriloquist dummy, Charlie McCarthy. Although dummies are not clown dolls, there is overlap between ventriloquist dummies and clowns. Ventriloquist dummies can not only be painted as clowns, they are also viewed the same way as clowns. Ventriloquism is a profession that takes a great amount of technicality and skill in the entertainment world, and is unfortunately now seen as creepy and weird by most people, and thus shows up in horror as painted, human-like creatures ready to prey on innocent people, being some sort of vessel containing some sort of ancient evil or malicious spirit. Both clown dolls and ventriloquist dummies are unfortunately victims of the uncanny valley effect. But it should be noted that this trope didn't pop up until after people saw dummies as charming and innocent. They had to be popular and loved before they could be feared and hated, thus corrupting them and making them scary and haunted. Fell into the idea of something innocent becoming something malicious. We see this idea first showing up in the 1945 horror anthology, The Dead of Night, and much later in the Twilight Zone episode, The Dummy, in 1962. It would only be 2 years later in 1964 that the British horror film Devil Doll would come out, and finally in 1978, the horror film Magic. Using ventriloquism as an example, you have to be loved and adored to be corrupted and scary. You can't have one without the other. You can't have a love for Edgar Bergen and ventriloquist performances without having the super scary Twilight Zone episodes, the movie Magic, the horror film Devil Doll. One of these things can't exist without the other thing. And what if I told you that's exactly what happened to clowns in American culture? You see, it's well known amongst clowns in other countries that Americans specifically carry more fear for clowns. Japanese developers working on ARMS even found this out and found it a hilarious weakness. But it wasn't always this way. Clowns were loved before they were hated. Before they were associated with killers and creepers, circus clowns provided entertainment for years. They were family mascots selling you burgers, Fanta, and even Pez. There were so many TV clowns in the 1950s that a majority of them and their catalogs and episodes have been lost to time. Clowns were normal to see at birthday parties, in hospitals, circuses, and movies, and well, now it's much more rare to see a clown. And so, something loved became so popular that it finally had a chance to be something scary. Because again, when it comes to making something loved, something feared, you need to be loved and adored before you can be corrupted and seen as anything less than innocent. The first genuinely scary clown doll appears in the iconic 1982 film Poltergeist. It's important to remember that this movie was made in 1982, meaning a majority of the children watching this movie were born in the 70s. And in the 70s, clowning was still majorly popular, and characters like Bozo were still on TV, with TV shows like Bozo Circus that ran from 1961 to 1980. In combination with the popularity of Bozo, local TV shows that often had clown mascots, and many clown mascots still being around selling burgers, drinks, and toys, the probability of a child having a clown doll in their life they saw as loving and warm was very, very high. In fact, popular clown dolls during this time period were actually mostly handmade. Hand-making your children toys and clothing were still very popular in the late 70s and early 80s, and patterns for mothers and grandmothers at the time to make clown dolls for their children and grandchildren were extremely popular and came in many different sizes and varieties. It's unfortunately some of these dolls that you can find being claimed that they're haunted when really it was just someone's little Mima in 1980 who wanted to crochet them a little clown doll. I thought I would just add that in here. So with that in mind, the scenes from Poltergeist where the clown itself becomes evil and twisted are more understandably scary to a child born around that time because they aren't already seeing the clown as evil and scary like a child would today. They are seeing it as a trusting friend that they probably have in their own room. And so when it is revealed that it is quite the opposite and it's not something they can trust, it's very shocking. A child that saw this movie at that time might walk into their room feeling more wary of the clown dolls that they once saw as friends. And actually, the Poltergeist clown itself was handmade. It was created by a clown doll maker named Annette Little. Annette Little had a shop at the time called Here Comes the Clowns in San Diego, California. She made all different kinds of clown-related items, and you can occasionally find Annette Little's work on the internet for sale. Annette made 4 different versions of the Poltergeist clown. 2 faces were happy, and 1 was a transition from happy to scary, and the 4th being the scary one. The transitional face was actually not used in the movie. In fact, the 4th clown doll with the evil face sold for a whopping $656,250 in 2023. In the early days of eBay, Sean Clark from the 2006 TV show Horror's Hallowed Grounds was able to get one for a huge steal from one of the children of Annette Little who listed it for sale there. Clark, who collects horror artifacts and screen-use props, has an extensive collection of holy grails in the horror community, and Clark himself has even been called in to help verify other originals since he had one himself. The second Poltergeist clown doll with the happy face was bought by Zach Baggins for his haunted museum in 2020 for $80,000 and was previously displayed at Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas. The evil version of the Poltergeist clown was actually rumored to be missing until its recent sale, and it comes with quite an interesting history. You see, they built a mechanical version of the doll's body to attack Robbie in the movie. But during the scene where its long arms wrap around Robbie and start to choke him, the machine did so way too aggressively, and the actor who played Robbie, Oliver Robbins, began yelling that he couldn't breathe. At first, Steven Spielberg thought he was simply acting, but he looked at his face and it was changing color, so he realized that the child was actually being strangled, and he was able to save him by prying the machine off of Oliver's neck and saving his life. Had it not been for that, the Poltergeist clown could actually have been a real-life killer clown doll. After Poltergeist became the smash hit that it was in the horror community, it went on to inspire many other movies to have children in paranormal situations with toys and dolls more than ever before. 5 years later, in 1987, the movie The Dolls also featured the idea of dolls being more than they seem and murdering and attacking guests. The little girl in the movie, Judy, holds a doll named Mr. Punch who aids her. Mr. Punch is based on the puppet puppet show character from Punch and Judy, and the name Judy is an Easter egg pointing to this. Punch himself is based on the character Punchinella from Commedia dell'arte, a jester-like character that wears a pointed hat and shoes that also became popular in puppetry. All things considered, Mr. Punch counts as a clown doll, although the dolls is nothing like Poltergeist. Actually, Poltergeist itself wasn't safe from being ripped off either because the 1988 horror film Ghosthouse copies the design of Annette Little's clown doll. It's extremely evident in the sculpting of the cheeks and eyes that they were trying to copy her design, and even down to his hat and body size. This clown also turns evil, much like the clown from Poltergeist, and Ghosthouse in particular is a very good example of Poltergeist directly inspiring other movies and media, and also knockoffs. But that wasn't the only thing going on in 1988. In 1988, that was also the same year Child's Play first released, where once again we see a child fighting with a toy they trusted, intertwined with supernatural elements. Chucky himself also being based on the Zuni doll segment from the 1975 movie Trilogy of Terror and the Living Doll episode of The Twilight Zone. Spooky evil dolls were really nothing new, but Chucky hit at a time that made it the perfect opportunity to really instill new fear in a new generation of children, seeing as the impact of Poltergeist and its imitators was already on the rise. So from the early to late 80s, there was an abundance of new horror movies about dolls, toys, and puppets starting to become more and more popular, all following the release of Poltergeist. After both The Dolls, Ghosthouse, and Child's Play were made, another horror movie that some consider a cult classic came out called Puppet Master. In Puppet Master, much like The Dolls, there is a jester puppet, plainly named the Jester, amongst other killer puppets. Although unrelated to the killer toys, put a pin on the board somewhere that in 1990 the It miniseries would finally debut and make its way into the spotlight. 2 years after that, in 1992, the movie Demonic Toys came out, where among other evil toys, there is an evil Jack-in-the-Box called Jack Attack, which in a way is sort of a fusion of the ideas from Puppet Master, the dolls, and Poltergeist itself. Although I'm not mentioning each and every instance of killer dolls and killer clown dolls and combing it over with a fine-tooth comb, what I am trying to do is show you that there is a pattern and where it started in order to understand why we are where we are and why we associate clown dolls and even ventriloquist dummies and jack-in-the-boxes as creepy and evil almost automatically. And, well, the reason is because all those years ago, when all those things were still seen as innocent and fun, making them scary was shocking and captivating. But as horror started to evolve, we started making them scary so much that we didn't realize that it impacted the world around us. And, to put it simply, the newer generation stopped associating those things with good-natured and innocent fun because that simply wasn't the media being made around clowns and ventriloquist dummies and things like that. In fact, clowns became scarier as not only the horror movies changed, but the American attitude around clowns changed as well. And clowns fell from being mascots seen on TV and even at our birthday parties. There would also be real-life events happening alongside popular media and television that would come to impact the way that we view clowns. In the late 70s, 3 years before Poltergeist had come out, an event that would shake clowning and its perception forever for Americans was the arrest of John Wayne Gacy in 1978. Gacy, a serial killer who targeted young boys, was never known to have killed anyone as a clown, although he did perform a scary handcuff trick on someone as one. He mostly used clowning and clown organizations to look like a good member of the community in a time where being a clown for charity parades and birthday parties was seen as something noble that someone could do for their community. Gacy, who was also into politics, used this as a way to appear like a wolf in sheep's clothing. At the time, clowns weren't seen as a wolf automatically, but instead the sheep. The true wolf was actually Gacy himself, who killed as a regular man. When he was ultimately arrested for these heinous crimes, he was basically sensationalized as a killer clown. In fact, at that time, it was really shocking that someone who cared about the community in the way that he pretended to would turn around and commit these terrible and sickening acts. Unfortunately, his legacy as a killer clown is stained forever into American clowning history, and it didn't help that he himself ran with the idea that he killed as a clown instead of a contract contractor who used to cruise bus stations at night for young boys. He even made paintings popularizing himself and his below-average clown persona, Pogo. From here, Gacy being seen as a murder clown would go on to inspire all different kinds of murderous clown media, not just movies. In fact, Gacy would continue to be written about, interviewed, and spoken to until his execution on May 10th, 1994. Most people actually think that the killer clown Pennywise is connected to Gacy. Pennywise the Killer Clown was, to keep it simple, the villain of the 1986 novel It, which had been written 8 years after Gacy's arrest and 4 years after Poltergeist, hitting pop culture with an uppercut of clown fear in a whole new way. Stephen King, however, denies having ever been inspired by Gacy. It made sense to make a clown figure that was at first welcoming and enticing in order to trap its victims with fear. King himself actually using the concept seen time and time again here that something innocent becoming something paranormal and evil makes it scarier. In the 50s and 60s, you'd probably be really excited if a random clown offered you a balloon or helped you get your paper boat back. But now, if a clown appeared to you out of nowhere and offered you a balloon, alone, somewhere isolated, based on all the media and depictions of clowns, you'd immediately be like, no, going home, bye. But back then, back before people thought of clowns and strangers this way, you might say, oh wow, a free balloon, score! It was more so the timing itself of the novel and subsequent film made after that that would feed into the killer clown trope, with the miniseries coming out in 1990 and Gacy being nationwide news for being executed in 1994. It didn't help that around this time in the 80s, Stranger Danger and Satanic Panic were both affecting families at an all-time high. If anything, Pennywise, Gacy, and Poltergeist were the perfect cocktail to create a new and different outlook on clowning. Clowns weren't just your friendly neighborhood mascots anymore. They could be the unsuspecting evil entity ready to devour you. And all of this media would eventually leak over to other countries as well. This is how things would continue to go into the 90s and 2000s as well. In Season 4, Episode 12 of Tales from the Crypt, a clown puppet comes to life and avenges his puppeteer after he is killed by his wife and her lover. Instead of understanding that things like clowns and even ventriloquist dummies were once loved and seen as something positive because of the media around them, we'd only ever see them as something scary. So, for instance, most 90s kids see ventriloquist dummies and they think of Slappy from the Goosebumps series, but Slappy wouldn't exactly be so scary if it wasn't for the previous depictions of horror dummies in the 60s and 70s. In fact, R.L. Stine himself cites the Twilight Zone as an inspiration for Slappy, but because there is no context, people will see dummies now, and instead of seeing them as a tool that a talented ventriloquist might use, it's seen as a murder doll that can come to life and chase you. If you showed someone a photo of a dummy, they'd probably tell you they were ugly or scary or haunted. There is an interesting meeting of both ventriloquism and clowns going on in horror. We first see it in the design of Billy from Saw in 2004, a strange combination of both ventriloquist dummies and clowns, with his white skin, red lips, and cheeks, and his dummy mouth, suit, and hair. It's hard to deny he's not an amalgamation of our fears, a weird hybrid of all the scary things we've seen in horror movies before it.
You wanna play a little game?
Not only that, but James Wan, the director of Saw, would go on to also direct the 2007 film Dead Silence, the ventriloquist horror film to end all horror films, where there is a small scene with a clown dummy, and he is sitting in a chair just like the clown in Poltergeist. Thank you, Poltergeist. In 2009, we'd see another one of these horror amalgamations in the movie The Hole, where we get a Mr. Punch, Jester-esque clown doll that scares a child and runs around in very Puppet Master child's play-like fashion. In fact, we would probably be here all day if I tried to track down every single occurrence of something relating to all these horror films and phenomena, but it is good to point out that, much like Billy from Saw, there is another design that reads vaguely clown-like, and that's Annabelle in 2014. Some people do think that Annabelle herself, the original Annabelle, was a clown doll because she was originally a Raggedy Ann doll in real life, but it should be noted that Raggedy Ann is actually not a clown. But when you think about what people have started to relate clowns to looking like in modern times, Raggedy Ann has a lot of things that we relate to clowns. She has 3 things that make people think she's a clown. She has red nose, red hair, and pale skin. And although the movie version of Annabelle is not a clown, she does does have blush cheeks, red lips, and a little bit of the same sculpting style as Annette Little. It all goes back to Poltergeist. And here is Annabelle sitting in a box in real life with striped legs, and here is Annabelle again, sitting down in a chair, much like someone else we know. And you know, speaking of the way Americans see clowns as generic red-nosed, red hair, and white-faced Ronald McDonald clones, that's the direction they took for the iconic clown doll in the 2015 remake of Poltergeist. And it's interesting because I think the redesign says a lot about what our fears of clowns have evolved into. The first Poltergeist clown had charm and pizzazz and a homemade quality to him, and it reflected a lot of the toys of that time, while the update to the clown in Poltergeist looks more or less like something someone would come up with when trying to draw Ronald McDonald from memory, mixed with Jimbo, the mascot for the children's company Gymboree. Honestly, with both of those references together, it definitely gave me the vibes of Gen X or an older millennial's caricature of what someone thinks a scary clown should be based on the clowns they had around them at the time. The Poltergeist clown from 2015 is also really corny, and it's not scary because it's something that's been overused in horror by now. Nothing about it is fresh or gives us any type of new fears or feelings. It's not scary because it already looks corrupted and scary, and it already looks scary because that's how most people see clowns anyways. This clown didn't have stages that effectively made him seem like his personality was changing like the first Poltergeist doll. He just starts out creepy looking. Even Scary Movie did a better job at making a Poltergeist clown. That says so much that the horror movie that was just making fun of Poltergeist made a better clown doll than the horror movie that remade it. Crazy. Because horror movies that play on these tropes are sort of becoming stale and like snakes eating their own tail, we also get hilarious movies like Clown Doll in 2019, where the evil clown doll in question looks like he pressed randomize on a terrible clown Halloween costume generator. He even has a ruffle collar and a giant bow tie combo with a generic rainbow wig and googly eyes. So absolutely zero effort, 1 out of 10 stars. You only get the 1 star because I like the big bow tie. Also, anytime you see a rainbow wig on a clown, I need you to know this is specifically a trope that came from cheap Halloween costumes, and to most clowns, it just signals a bad or cheap clown design or lack of effort. Not farther behind the clown doll atrocity was another 2019 bummer, Jack in the Box, which yes, is about a Jack in the Box that combines the scary clown trope with the scary toy trope. Although I myself found this movie to be a bit better than, Clown Doll, I do think it's actually not that exciting. But the design itself of the Jack in the Box is really cool, and I think it has a bit of a Joseph Grimaldi feel to it, which is really awesome, and I think it puts it way above Clown Doll. So when it comes to scary clown dolls in media, stuff just started to get really, really cheesy. Because the way that clowns changed from loved to hated and feared, it's these generic and boring beliefs on what a clown is now that brings us to the reason why everyone thinks clown dolls are automatically haunted. Which is quite funny because there's been so many times I've seen something labeled as a haunted clown doll and it's actually made by a pretty well-known designer, brand, or toy company and is in perfect condition. But those fears ingrained in most of us from growing up and consuming content based off of an era of clowning we weren't alive for continues to backfire on most of us. A lot of people will tell me they're afraid of clowns, but I'll ask them that about Lunette or Ronald McDonald, and they'll say no, not them. I think it became a common fear raised into children who didn't grow up with clowns everywhere from the mid-80s and after. So now as people are uncovering antiques from the past that have to do with clowning, their first thought is to think of it as negative instead of something positive, or assume it's attached to something from somewhere else, like a spirit or demon. Half the time I feel like people just see a clown doll and they think, ooh, creepy, this could be a great content generator, and they roll with it. And the reason that type of content is so successful is because people are scared of clowns because of all of the ways that these media have portrayed clowns for the past 20 plus years. It makes perfect sense for somebody who grew up only knowing about evil clowns to see a clown doll and think, yeah, that thing is definitely haunted. And hey, who am I to tell you that your clown doll isn't haunted? Maybe it is. Maybe that brand new clown doll you bought, still in the box, really is the vessel that contains a dead child from 80 years before the doll was even made. Okay, that's sarcasm, and I do joke, but it's probably just because I'm tired of people seeing my Precious Moments clown doll collection and like immediately getting scared, even though they're so cute. But that also doesn't mean there's not any haunted clown dolls. Have you ever come into contact with a haunted clown doll? Let me know. Show me. I'd like to see it. And I don't want people out there just saying, I think I know everything. I don't. I just wanted to talk about this weird phenomena of how we basically decided that clowns are super scary based on all the media around us, and so many people are born with that perception of clowns that now when we find a clown doll that like someone's Mima made in like 1982, we're like, this thing is definitely haunted. So I think that that's like part of the appeal to some of these people when they see a clown doll. They just immediately think, ah, it's bad, it's scary, it's gonna get me. And it's like, no, I think it's really whimsical and fun. But I hope you guys enjoyed this long-winded rant on haunted clown dolls and their history, and I hope you have a wonderfully haunted Halloween if you celebrate. And hey, if you do have a haunted clown doll, please do not sit them in a chair in your room. Please. Bye!